My name is Patricia Hartman. I'm 57 years old, a divorcee, and I live in a modest ranch house in Wisconsin. I've worked as a medical office administrator at a pediatric clinic for 23 years. Raised 3 children, Daniel, my oldest at 35, Sarah who's 33, and Marcus, my baby at 30, and spent most of my adult life making sure they never had to struggle the way I did after the divorce. Last Thursday, I received a text message that changed everything. It was from Sarah. Just 3 words in the preview, "Mom, we decided." I smiled before opening it, thinking maybe it was about the business launch party she'd been planning. I had just wired $45,000 to help her open her boutique marketing agency, covering the office deposit, equipment, and 6 months of operating expenses. But when I opened the message, the smile died. "Mom." The message started. "No, hi Mom, just Mom like a label." Sarah explained that she and her business partner Vanessa had finalized the investor meeting guest list for the launch event in Chicago. And after much consideration, they decided it would be best if I didn't attend in person. She added that Vanessa's parents, who were contributing to the business, wanted to keep the event professionally strategic, and that having family there would muddy the optics. At the end, she included a line that felt like a knife between my ribs: "Maybe you can come to the office sometime after we're established. When it makes more sense." The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I would understand. That I would accept being discarded after funding her dream. I stared at that screen for a long time. My tea grew cold. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. Something inside me quietly shifted, like a door I'd been holding open for decades finally swinging shut. I replied with just 5 words, "Understood. Best of luck to you." No emotion, no argument, just a quiet withdrawal. And I knew those 5 words would echo louder than any confrontation. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want tears. I wanted the silence to speak for itself. I set down my phone, poured out the cold tea, and got ready for work like it was any other Thursday. But it wasn't. That was the day I stopped pretending my sacrifices meant anything to my daughter. That was the day everything began to shift. The drive to the clinic that morning was quiet. Wisconsin's late April air held the promise of summer, but I barely noticed. My mind kept circling the same question: how did we get here? I've spent over 2 decades at Riverside Pediatrics. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. And stability was what I needed after my husband left when the kids were still in elementary school. I remember standing in our cramped apartment kitchen, bills spread across the counter, trying to figure out how to pay for both groceries and Daniel's school supplies. Back then, I didn't think twice about working double shifts. I took every overtime opportunity, canceled plans, skipped meals. I told myself, there'll be time for me later. There never was. Every penny I saved went to my children. When Daniel wanted to start his landscaping business, I co-signed the equipment loan and wrote a $15,000 check for his truck. When Sarah changed her major 3 times and needed another year of tuition, I paid without complaint. When Marcus had his accident and needed physical therapy not covered by insurance, I maxed out my credit card and picked up weekend shifts to cover it. I never kept score. That's what mothers do, right? But that text made me feel like a transaction, like I'd been useful and now I wasn't. Like I had an expiration date and it had passed. Back at the office, Dr. Chun stopped by my desk during the morning lull. She's one of those rare physicians who remembers staff birthdays and asks about your life. She noticed something was wrong immediately. "You look like you've had a shock," she said, setting a coffee from the hospital cafeteria on my desk. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say my daughter just excluded me from her business launch after I gave her $45,000, but instead I smiled and said I'd had a rough night. She didn't push. That small act of kindness, the coffee, the concern, nearly broke me. After all the noise in my head that morning, it reminded me that I still existed, that I still mattered to someone. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. Sarah again. Her name lit up my screen like an accusation. 3 texts in rapid succession: "Mom, are you mad? I know the text was blunt, but this is just business. Please don't make this difficult. I didn't respond. Not yet. I just sat there sipping my coffee and thought, maybe it's time to stop being the one who always accommodates. Maybe it's time to stop being invisible in my own story. That afternoon, I made a decision that would crack open everything we'd built. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to act. After work, I didn't go straight home. I drove to Community First Bank, 3 blocks from the clinic. Jennifer, the branch manager, had helped me with everything from setting up college funds to refinancing my mortgage. She always greeted me warmly. Mrs. Hartman, she smiled, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. What can I do for you today? I sat down and placed my purse carefully on the floor. My voice was calm, almost eerily calm. I need to freeze an account. She blinked. Which account? The business account. The one I opened as cosigner for Sarah's LLC. Jennifer's smile faltered. May I ask why? The circumstances have changed, I replied without elaborating. She pulled up the account information. You're listed as co-owner with full authority. You can absolutely freeze it. But there's currently $52,000 in there, the $45,000 you transferred plus some client deposits. Are you certain? I nodded. I'm certain. $52,000. Money she was planning to use for her launch party, her first marketing campaigns, her grand opening. Money I'd scraped together from years of overtime shifts and skipped vacations. For a business I wasn't important enough to celebrate publicly. I signed the necessary paperwork and left the bank without hesitation. By the time I got home, there were 14 missed calls from Sarah and 6 from Daniel. One voicemail simply said, "Mom, what did you do?" I turned off my phone. In the living room, I poured myself a glass of the wine I'd been saving for Sarah's launch party, the one she told me about 6 months ago, back when I was still invited. I took it out to the back deck and sat in the fading sunlight. Birds sang in the neighbor's maple tree. A lawnmower hummed in the distance. Everything felt still. And then the memories started flooding back. All the birthdays I celebrated alone. All the holidays where I cooked elaborate meals and waited for calls that came 3 days late. All the small sacrifices nobody noticed, the clothes I didn't buy, the vacations I never took, the car I drove for 12 years because my kids needed help with rent deposits and emergency expenses, and, just this once, Mom. I thought about Vanessa's parents. People who barely knew Sarah. Yet their opinion carried more weight than mine, the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college, who'd believed in her business dream enough to empty my savings account. I thought about the way Sarah phrased it, muddy the optics. As if my presence, the presence of the woman who'd made her entire life possible, was an embarrassment. And finally, I thought about myself. Not as a mother, not as a divorcee, but as a woman. What did I want? Peace. Dignity. A life that didn't revolve around being an ATM for people who only called when they needed something. That night, around 8:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. It was Daniel, still in his work clothes, boots muddy, flannel shirt untucked. He looked uncomfortable, his phone clutched in one hand. "Mom," he said, stepping inside before I could speak. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" "Sarah's having a breakdown." I closed the door calmly. "Hello to you too, Daniel." He sighed, already pacing. "She says you froze the business account. That you're sabotaging her launch. What's going on?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Sabotaging? For not funding a party I'm not invited to?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Vanessa's parents put in a lot of money. They have expectations about the image." "Image?" I raised an eyebrow. "I put in $45,000. I co-signed the business registration. I'm not an image, Daniel. I'm the foundation." He froze. Wait. You froze the whole account? Every penny, I said evenly, sipping my wine. Daniel's face paled. Mom, they need that money. The venue deposit, the catering, the promotional materials. Not my problem anymore. His voice rose. Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter. And I'm her mother, I said quietly. A mother who was told she'd muddy the optics at her own daughter's celebration. He ran his hands through his hair, visibly agitated. You always make everything about you. And that was it. That was the moment something inside me finally snapped clean. Get out of my house. What? You heard me, Daniel. Get out. Mom. No, I said, firm but soft. I've given everything I had, and I'm done being the villain in a story I wrote with love. Daniel stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind him, not a slam, just a quiet click that somehow felt louder. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart pounding, and realized something startling. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning, I woke to 67 missed calls and a cascade of increasingly frantic messages from Sarah. They started with passive-aggressive guilt. Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? This is ridiculous. Then the tone shifted. The account is frozen. We can't pay vendors. Everything is falling apart. Vanessa's parents are threatening to pull out. They said this proves I come from an unstable family. At 4:17 a.m., she sent, I don't understand why you're punishing me. I smiled into my morning coffee. Of course she didn't understand. Sarah had grown up with my sacrifices woven so seamlessly into her life that she never stopped to question where the security came from, the support, the safety net. She just assumed it would always be there. That I would always be there. But not this time. Later that morning, while I was reviewing patient files at my desk, an email appeared in my personal inbox. The subject line read, Please, Mom. I opened it without expectation. Mom, she wrote, I know you're upset about the launch party, but this is extreme. We've lost the venue deposit. If we don't access the funds by end of business today, the caterer cancels and the printer won't release our materials. Vanessa's parents are beyond furious. They're saying this proves you're unstable and controlling. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending, but we need the account unfrozen first. There it was. They were willing to talk about letting me attend, now that the money was locked up. Not an apology. Not reflection. A negotiation. As if my presence at my own daughter's milestone could be bartered based on how generous I was feeling. I didn't respond. I closed the email and returned to my work. Around noon, Dr. Chun stopped by my desk. Lunch? There's a new Thai place that just opened. I usually declined. But something had shifted in me over the past 24 hours. Maybe I just needed to sit somewhere that didn't demand anything from me. So I nodded. I'd love that. Over pad Thai, she told me about her daughter's upcoming recital and how proud she was. Her eyes were warm, genuine. She paused and said gently, Patricia, forgive me for saying so, but you seem different today. Lighter, somehow. I surprised myself by telling her everything. The text. The exclusion. The frozen account. When I finished, she didn't judge. She didn't try to fix anything. She just said, sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to stop giving to people who only take. She reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. I think you did the right thing. For the first time in a long time, I believed it too. When I returned to my desk, there were more calls, more texts. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence was doing all the talking. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered on automatically. Everything looked peaceful. But there was someone sitting on my front steps. As I got closer, I recognized her, Amanda, Sarah's best friend since high school. She'd spent countless weekends at our house, treating it like her second home. Mrs. Hartman, she said softly, standing up. I'm sorry to ambush you like this. It's fine, I replied, unlocking the door. Would you like some tea? She followed me into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the familiar space. I filled the kettle and waited. Sarah sent you? I finally asked. She hesitated. She's a mess. They had to cancel the launch party. Vanessa's parents pulled their investment. The whole business might collapse before it starts. I said nothing, placing 2 mugs on the counter. She knows she messed up, Amanda continued. She just doesn't know how to fix it. Is that why you're here? I asked. To fix it? She shook her head. No. I'm here to ask if there's anything she can say or do to change your mind. I paused. Was there? Would an apology change the fact that I was only valuable when I was useful? That I was disposable once my check cleared? I looked at Amanda, still young, still hopeful. No, I said quietly. There isn't. Her shoulders sagged. Not even if she apologizes? I handed her a mug of tea. Words are easy, Amanda. Especially when people are desperate. But the people who truly love you don't wait until you cut them off to see your worth. Amanda looked down into her tea, nodding slowly. I understand. Even if she doesn't yet. She didn't stay long. She just thanked me, hugged me gently, and disappeared into the evening. And I finally closed the door on a version of myself I'd outgrown years ago. The launch party never happened. According to Daniel, they tried to reschedule with a smaller venue, but without the account access and with Vanessa's parents withdrawing their support, everything fell apart. Vanessa blamed Sarah for the family drama and ended their partnership. Sarah eventually started freelancing from home, smaller scale, humbler beginnings. I never unfroze the account. After 6 months, I withdrew my $45,000 and put it toward the down payment on a small cabin by Lake Superior. My retreat. My peace. In the months that followed, Sarah sent 2 more emails. Long, emotional ones. Half apology, half justification. I read them once, then archived them. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. There's a strange peace that comes with letting go, not in rage, but in clarity. For the first time in decades, I woke up not wondering who needed something from me, not bracing for another guilt trip disguised as love. I made a new rule for myself: if my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. I go to work. I read novels. I joined a watercolor painting class. I have dinner with friends who see me, not what I can give them. And I've learned something I wish I'd known sooner: you don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself.